you ever feel like it's hard to sell like middle of the road? It's not middle of the road. It's responsible. It's what you should be doing. It's not sexy. It's not trendy. It is like, this is exactly what you need to be doing. You ever feel like it's hard to sell that, or do you have a certain?
I feel like it's like looking at the Mercedes-Benz dealer and saying, do you ever find it's hard to sell Mercedes-Benz? Like, no, not at all.
Hey, welcome to episode 7 of the Fit Life Formula podcast. My name is Brian Sippitz. I'm the founder of Advantage Strength and Conditioning in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And the Fit Life Formula podcast is a show specifically for the members of Advantage Strength. But if you are somebody who wants to move well your entire life, wants to stay active, wants to do things with your families and friends without pain, this is a show for you. You're going to learn a ton from our conversations and get a lot out of the subjects that we tackle each week. Today on the show, we are beyond lucky to have, really, he's a legend of strength and conditioning. His name is Mike Boyle. He is the founder of Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning in Woburn, Mass. But what is a little bit more significant, I guess, is his career as a professional strength and conditioning coach. He's been in the Boston area. He was with Boston University for over a decade, working mostly with the hockey team. He's worked with the men and women's national programs on strength and conditioning. He has been a part of the Boston Bruins strength and conditioning staff. He's been a part of the Red Sox strength and conditioning staff. So he is literally a legend in this field. And the most, I think, significant contribution is not to those teams, but to the industry as a whole, because he has surrounded himself with some of the smartest people on the planet, and then sort of, I guess, curated the information and sort of put it to test, put it to work in a team environment, in a group environment, and sort of teased out what works, what doesn't, what's appropriate, what's not. And so today on our show, we're going to be talking with Coach Boyle about what's most important for adults and sort of the differences that he has found in between the adult program, his adult program, and his athlete program, both of which are gigantic. So this is the guy that we learn from. He's the reason that we train the way we do at Advantage. He's the reason that we are so different from anyone else in our area. So please enjoy this conversation with Mike Boyle of Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning in Woburn, Mass.
All right, we are on the phone with Mike Boyle of Mike Boyle Strength and Conditioning out in Woburn, Mass. And Coach Boyle is the authority when it comes to training athletes these days. I know, Coach, you have heavily influenced not only the entire industry, but what we do here at Advantage. And so we're pretty much by the book with your system. So we are talking to the guy who's responsible for the way we do things here at Advantage. So, Coach Boyle, thanks so much for jumping on with us.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me. I love, you know me, I love to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, never short on words. But that's good. And today we're maybe, I don't know, I guess you do talk about it quite a bit, because the athlete training and the adult training are getting very close, just with a few changes in terms of what exercises you might pick for certain populations. But I want to talk a little bit about what's most important for adults, and what, just your background has been in athletics, right? So you were with the Bruins, Boston University for a long time, with the Red Sox, pretty much name a Boston sport, and you've been there. Pretty close. Anything with the Celtics?
Nope, nothing with the Celtics.
Okay. So there's one that you missed out on that one, but I think you're doing pretty well. So talk a little bit about like your background in terms of the athletic teams, and then when you started to see more adults coming your way.
I have to say, and I've said this before, I think what really started to drive the adult business, as much as I hate to give CrossFit credit for anything, I do believe that CrossFit popularized this idea of group whatever you want to call it, group functional training, group athletic training, training like an athlete. And I sort of categorize our adult clients as CrossFit refugees, in terms of the people who realized that the CrossFit thing wasn't going to work and that they got hurt and that this wasn't what they wanted. Yet I think they were kind of bitten by the bug a little bit in terms of, gee, I really like this idea of not being, not doing the stupid hamster wheel kind of stuff that people had been doing for so many years, where they went and walked on a treadmill, did some machines, and we kind of ran with that. I realized, okay, this market is exploding, and we have people coming to us saying things like, do you offer adult classes? Because what had happened to us was we had a smattering of adults, and mostly what we did is we kind of let some adults slide into what we were doing with our athletes. It was like, hey, if you want to come and train, you can train basically with the kids. And then we started doing some one-on-one personal training, because we had people coming and saying, hey, can you train me? Would you do personal training? So I think we were very much in the sort of life gives you lemons, you make lemonade kind of category, in terms of we weren't turning business away, and we were watching the trends in the industry and realizing, hey, there's a huge opportunity here. And we'd be stupid not to get involved in that. And I think sometimes you can be very stuck in the, oh, I only train athletes thing. But the reality of that is that that means 9 months out of the year, you're going to basically be busy from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock if you're lucky.
Yeah. And to be honest, the reason that we ended up here, so at Advantage now, we're probably 70-30 on the adult side, which is a flip-flop from 4 or 5 years ago. And we got our start with youth athletes, but I was kind of coached in a direction by Vince Gabriel.
Yeah.
I do a lot of coaching with Vince Gabriel, and he is sort of he started pointing some things out, like, when you have athletes, number one, for the most part, 25% of them are leaving every year, right? You lose 25% of your kids, unless they go on to college athletics or something like that. So they graduate, but you're always refilling. It's up and down. They're in, they're out, they're in season, out of season. And so the adults have been a very good thing for us, because it levels us out, right? So we have numbers year round. And it's not, in terms of the strength training, the true strength training, it's not that far off from what we had done with athletes. Talk a little bit about what your adult programming looks like there, and kind of what the difference is from your athlete program.
Our adult program in concept is identical. Where it changes is probably in what we would consider doing for power development with adults versus what we would consider doing with power development for kids. So for us, and I did an Instagram post about this last week, we do not Olympic lift our adults. So I think that's a big differentiator for us, from our athletes to our adults, and from our adults to, say, CrossFit, in the sense that you won't see any cleans, you won't see any snatches, you won't see any thrusters, which is a term I hate, whatever, clean and jerk, you want to describe that. And you'll see, maybe the most extreme thing you'll see is a kettlebell swing. You'll see more jumps, and our power progressions in terms of plyos will be much more basic, and we probably won't get as involved as we might with our athletes, but we will have our athletes jumping and hopping and bounding and doing things like that. So I always tell everybody, if you came in and you watched and you really understood concept, you'd right away say, oh, this is exactly the same thing. And it really is, in terms of, we foam roll, we stretch, we dynamic warm up, we do our power work, we go in, we do our strength training, we get done, we do our conditioning. That is really the same format that we follow with our athletes, with just some smaller tweaks, if you want to use that word, in terms of the plyos are going to be more progressive, and we're going to probably be doing things from a power development standpoint in the weight room that are going to be, I guess, a little bit more aggressive. I don't like to be aggressive. Somebody asked the other day on my Instagram post, they said, well, what do you consider an adult? And I said, anybody with a job who has to go to work is an adult. So, and I think that's the difference. When you get that person hurt, I don't care what the person does. I don't care if they work in an office. I don't care if they work for a living in some sort of trade. When you have that person injured so that they can't perform their job, that's a major screw up.
Yeah.
So that's where I think, versus the CrossFit idea of, hey, people are going to get hurt, things are going to happen, we're going to break some eggs. And it's like, nah, that's not the way we're going to look at it. We're going to look at it and think we want to be as aggressive as possible within the guidelines of common sense.
Yeah, and I'm shocked, honestly. We don't jump here. I guess maybe it's me. We've had maybe one incident with jumping, and since then I've just scrapped it. We don't jump with adults. I'm sort of surprised to hear that you do, but I think it still should be a part of things, just maybe done in the right way. Maybe zero fatigue.
Yeah, zero fatigue. We've got all soft plyo boxes. So we don't have any hard boxes. I have no problem with 6-inch box jumps. I have no problem, like we're doing some of our hopping progression stuff now is literally done like in and out of the ladder in terms of just simply getting somebody to, whether it's hopping or bounding, just that transition. I think the difference and the reason we probably get ourselves in trouble is as athletes or as strength coaches, our vision of jumping is very different from maybe what the average adult needs. And I think we need to be able to make that distinction and be able to look at that and say, okay, this person might literally be able to need to get 6 inches in the air and land. This person might need to, I always said, sometimes when we're jumping, it's literally over a line. And it's very, very non-aggressive. And we actually have a couple of MVP shuttles. I love the MVP shuttle. We also have a total gym jump trainer, which will even allow us to start some people with jumping with less than their body weight. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the research, it absolutely is important. Adults are losing power at a rate of 1.7 times their strength gain or their strength loss, which means when you put that into numbers, if you had people who lost, someone who loses strength might lose 10% of their strength in a year, and they might lose 17% of their power. And over 2 years, those numbers would go to 20 and 35. And so that's really significant because now you think over 3 years, they'd go to like 30 and 51.
Wow.
So the ability of that adult to move with intent, I guess, is a skill that's being lost. A lot of adults will strength training, will do stuff slow, and will develop the ability. It's almost like, they could lift a refrigerator, they could push a car, there's some stuff they could do, but in a real pure reactive sense, it's going to be more difficult for them. So I think it's really essential. All of our adults throw medicine balls, all of our adults will jump, again, within the confines of good common sense. And then, and then obviously everybody is doing strength work.
Yeah, I mean, it's not your quote, but I hear you say it a lot, that common sense is not so common. So yeah, I mean, it's good to get a picture of what that looks like, because the ability to jump, it's not necessarily that they're going to be like clearing hurdles anytime soon, but that's what that reactivity is, what allows them to catch themselves after a slip on the ice.
Exactly. I mean, adults, if you think, they're being hurt by falls and they're being hurt stepping off of curbs, there's really simplistic things that are happening to these people that are causing them to get injured that will really not be, won't be solved by strength.
Okay. What else do you notice? What are the key complaints when people come in?
The biggest thing with adults, one, obviously we're dealing with a population that's been seated, generally speaking, for a really long time. Because again, if somebody works with their hands and is outside or whatever, is in a trade, they're probably not coming to you. I think if you looked at your adult population and looked at what their employment was, you would probably find that you're basically dealing with seated people. So the ability of these people, the warm-up, I always think the warm-up, the mobility, the foam rolling, the stretching is the most important part of what these adults are doing. maybe more important than the strength training part, because they're going to be, a lot of what's going to go wrong with them is going to be based on the fact that they're constantly in these flexed positions all day. So I even have to do it with my staff. I'm always chirping my staff about, make sure the adults roll, make sure the adults stretch. Don't let them half-ass it. Don't let them come in late and not do this stuff. Because there are people who love to just blow in late and jump into the lift. So I'm very adamant with them about, the other thing that'll happen is they'll come in sometimes and start the group. If the group's at 9, they'll start at 9 and go right to warm up and skip rolling, because a lot of the people who like to roll will come early and roll. And then they'll get mad. Well, I came early and rolled. Why do we have to roll again? And I'm always like, because the class starts or the group starts at 9. You want to come 20 minutes early and roll, knock yourself out. But at 9 o'clock, we're going to roll for 5 or 6 minutes. Because the people that we want to get are the people who aren't coming early, not the people who are. So there's just lots of, I think, and again, common sense, and I've used this quote a lot too, we fight human nature for a living. That is our job. And it's our job with athletes, and it's our job with our adult population. It's just normal to kind of take a shortcut, take the path of least resistance, do what you like to do versus what's good for you. That's all normal stuff. And that's why I think our programming is so good, because we look at the programming and say, okay, you're going to come in the gym and I'm going to have you do what I think you should do. Not what, people say, well, I want to do this. Well, great. Get a gym membership, go to Golds, go wherever, go to 24-hour fitness. You can do whatever you want. If you come here, we're going to do what we think and what we feel is going to be best for you. And the good thing is, particularly with our adult population, they really have bought into that. We get a very good compliance rate.
Well, that's interesting too. I mean, so you look at something like a CrossFit, and by the way, you're a fairly solid CrossFit opposer. I mean, pretty well known across the industry, but you look at something like that and it seems like fun and exciting. But like you said, programs like that fuel programs like yours and mine, where they tried that stuff, or, an Orange Theory or something like that, and they got hurt. And now they realize that they need to do something that's a little bit more responsible. Outside of that, have you ever feel like it's hard to sell like middle of the road? It's not middle of the road. It's responsible. It's what you should be doing. It's not sexy. It's not trendy. It is like, this is exactly what you need to be doing. You ever feel like it's hard to sell that, or do you have a certain?
I feel like it's like looking at the Mercedes-Benz dealer and saying, do you ever find it's hard to sell Mercedes-Benz? Like, no, not at all. I think you have to know who you got to sell it to.
Right.
You don't want to sell it. If somebody wants a Lamborghini, I don't think you don't try to convince them to buy the 4-door Mercedes. But I think you need to know who your audience is, and you need to sell to your audience. And you need to realize that if you've got that sort of young 20-something just out of college I want to get after it, and I want to do cleans, and I want to do this, they're not your person. If you've got the super type A guy, same thing, who's in his 50s and always hurt and, wants you to kick his ass, probably not your person. And so I think you need to know, as with any product that you're selling, who you're selling to, and you need to be selling to the right people, and probably not beat yourself up. Sometimes I'll just look and think, yeah, that's not our market. And I'm not worried about it, because I think there's a lot of market out there. There's a lot of market. There's a lot of market share. I forget who it was. It might have been Plummer or Alan Cosgrove who said in their talk at the Perform Better Summit something to the effect of, only 10% of the people in the United States belong to a gym.
Mm-hmm.
That leaves you a lot of people.
Right.
90% of the people in the country don't train, don't take fitness seriously. So I think for what we're doing, it's even like me. I know that my audience is an intelligent trainer. So I don't go chase the dummies and try to convince them that I'm right, or that I'm worth following, or that I'm worth listening to. Because it'll take them a while to even get Mike Boyle. It'll take them a while. They'll have to hurt themselves and hurt some more people before it starts to make sense, and they start to kind of go, oh, I see what he means now. I get it. So I don't chase that crowd.
Hmm.
I kind of chase, there's a certain kind of coach or kind of trainer that will gravitate towards our information. And that's when you talk about sort of the Seth Godin book, Tribes, it's sort of, you need to try to build your tribe, and you need to try to identify people that are going to be good tribe members for you, as opposed to trying to force fit people who maybe aren't the right fit.
Right. And we experience that here too. Sometimes it's hard because I'm here all the time. It's hard to say, what do we do different? But unfortunately, what we do is so different from like, boot camps and Orange Theory and CrossFit stuff. And because it's so different, or because I'm here all the time, and because it makes so much sense to me, it doesn't seem like it's that different. So sometimes it's hard to explain, but.
Well, I have the standard. It's really funny when people say, what's your program like? I always say, well, it's like CrossFit, just not so stupid. And the crazy thing about it is, people get that. People look at me and go, okay. Because it is. I always say, if you listen to me talk and you listen to Greg Glassman talk, you'd probably say these guys have a lot in common.
Hmm.
And then if you really kind of scratched off that top layer and saw what we did or what we believed, you'd be like, these guys have nothing in common.
Mm-hmm.
But when you hear the CrossFit people they talk about, interval training and hard work and total body exercises and and you're like, yeah. And then you see it and you're like, oh no, not that. That isn't what I meant at all.
Yeah.
And, and that's where we talk about this idea sort of common sense. And it's the idea of, hey, we're going to train pretty hard, but we're going to train to technical failure. When you can't do it anymore, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
And we may undershoot the bar, particularly in the beginning, with the idea that, don't worry, I use the same analogies all the time. I use the same slides all the time, but, tortoise beat the hare, slow and steady wins the race. It's a marathon, not a sprint. All these things all apply to training in the sense that you don't need to be in a hurry, because all you're going to do is hurry up and plateau, because we're all going to get to a point where we don't get stronger. And any of us that have trained athletes know that. You've done it yourself. You've been an athlete. You've trained athletes. And the early part is easy. It's a layup. Everybody shows up. Everybody gets stronger. Everybody's doing great. And then a couple of years in, gains start to come a whole heck of a lot slower.
Mm.
Sometimes there are drops and there are dips as opposed to gains. So I think it's really easy. And like you said, sometimes you can get too close to it and not see how easy it is, and not see how good it is, and not see how beneficial it is. Whereas I think maybe luckily for me, I'm not that way, even though I am close to it, and I can look at it and think, no, this is, because I tell our coaches all the time, we're the Mercedes-Benz of the industry. If you get someone, because again, it's not Lamborghini, it's not the flashiest, it's not the most expensive. It's just the best, and it's really solid, and it's exactly, if you had money, it's what you buy. So, that it's and the same thing, it's classic, it's timeless. They don't change the body style very often. I think there's so many similarities between a company like Mercedes and a company like us.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I think, when people come in here for the first time, if we're meeting with them for the first time, depending on where they're coming from, they might watch a class. I had a lady the other day come in and watch a class and say, we walked through the gym to get back to my office, and I said, this is a pretty standard class for us. And she turned around, she looked, she's like, that's a class? And at first I was a little bit insulted, like, yeah, that's a class. But she's coming from a place that, people are jumping around, racing around inside the gym. And like, I said, this is going to be totally different from you. It's not that we don't work hard. It's hard these aren't easy classes, right? It's going to be a different kind of hard for you. So sometimes it's hard to explain that, but it's totally true. Like we want hard work. It's just going to look a lot different.
Right. It's and you said common sense. It's not going to be just sort of doing random shit to make it hard. And I think that's what happens sometimes in that today's Instagram post was sort of another anti-burpee post. But that's the classic. We had a couple of women who joined, and they would literally like start jogging in place between exercises and doing burpees. Looking at them like, what are they doing over there? And they're like, oh, they came from so-and-so's boot camp, and they don't want to stand still during the hour. And I looked at them and thought, yeah, they won't be here long. And they weren't. They probably signed up for a month, and at the end of a month they left and went back to their silly little boot camp thing where they could, everybody, no one gets to stand still for an hour. And I mean, again, there's an ass for every seed, right? And there are sometimes, and that's actually really applicable when you think there's an ass for every seed. Like there's some ass who will always want to do dumb things, and they're the person who's probably gravitated from CrossFit to Orange Theory now. And they love Orange Theory because it's hard. And, I've had people who've gone to Orange Theory and been like, oh my God, it was so totally random. And we just did this and did this and did this. And then we switched and did lifting. And it's like, yeah, but the funny thing is, most of those types of situations, athletes that we train probably will like those. I had a lot of athletes who loved CrossFit. And they used to always say, CrossFit, blah, 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 it's great. And I was like, no, it's not. I said, it's really great for you. It's great for a former collegiate athlete who learned to Olympic lift well in college. I said, because you go in and you kick everybody's ass. You're better at this than everybody in there in terms of, mainly because you're better. You know how to lift. You know how to Olympic lift. You know how to do these things. So you're having a lot of success. I said, but, soccer mom or, dad bod guy is not doing really well in that situation for the exact opposite reason, in terms of they weren't a college athlete and they're not a good Olympic lifter, and they're going to try too hard and they're going to get themselves hurt. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic. And I think for us, probably if you said, okay, which end of the spectrum are you on? We're on the soccer mom, dad bod end of the spectrum. If you walked in and looked at our adult groups, you wouldn't see a lot of like, oh, these studs, these guys are ripped, these guys look amazing. You'd see a lot of, well, that guy's a 50-year-old dad with he's a little chunky.
Yeah.
And that's, again, I think in a lot of ways that's the larger portion of the demographic. So it makes more sense. Who do you want to sell to? We want a program for ex-college athletes who want an unbelievable kick-ass workout after they get out of college. Okay, how many of them are there? The same number, that there were the first time, when you were training them as high school kids.
Yeah.
Whereas if you said, okay, I want to put a really good training program, because the thing that we try to emphasize, and again, I say this to our coaches, we're in the life-changing business. We can take somebody who's been really intimidated by exercise and maybe never exercised and bring them in and put them in a really safe situation that's really good for them where they get better, without saying, okay, go to 24-hour fitness and do the machines. And we can also take that ex-college athlete and give them a really challenging workout.
Yep.
And so I think that's the beauty. It's the beauty of a system, and it's the beauty of, like I said, you understand our system. When you've got this progression, regression idea built in, it's really easy. Because you can look at someone and think, okay, I know I want you to do a single leg knee dominant exercise. And now I'm going to think, okay, how do you do that? What are we going to do? We could have someone doing a bodyweight split squat, and we could have someone else doing a rear foot elevated split squat with 80 pounds in each hand. And they both would be doing a knee dominant unilateral exercise.
Yep.
And I think that's the key when you're looking at these things, is knowing that. I always say, if we can stay in category, we're in a really good spot.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, that's, I think the people who are listening to this are mostly our members, and will understand all that. I think it helps them sort of put everything in perspective, why we do this stuff. Just to start wrapping this up, you have a new book coming out, or is it out?
It's out.
Okay.
New Functional Training for Sports is out.
Okay, so that's New Functional Training for Sports. What about the adult book?
Oh, the adult book? No, that's not out yet. That's going to
Okay.
be, I don't know when that's going to be. I think I sent that to Kevin Carr, because I think Kevin Carr and I are going to write that together.
Okay.
Kevin was working on something and I was working on something, and Kevin kind of writes and thinks very similar to me. So I said, this might be a good project for the two of us. So I don't know. I would say that's the adult book, unfortunately, is 2 years away, probably, by the time you realize how long it takes to actually get one of these things from some notes in your computer to a bookstore near you.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll hold it down on my end until then. You keep doing good work with your people there, and we'll just buy a little time until that comes out. But no, truly, Coach, you've influenced obviously so many people, but so much of what we do here. And I know there's, a few hundred people here in Ann Arbor who are better off because of what you've curated. I know you're really upfront about the fact that you didn't create a lot of this stuff, but you're at least paying attention enough to realize what's good and what's bogus. So yeah, there are a lot of people here in Ann Arbor that thank you for that, and all over the country and all over the world. So yeah, we're really lucky to get to talk to you about this stuff. And anything else before we wrap up here? Anything else you want to add?
Nope, that's it. But if there's people listening that are on the training side, strengthcoach.com is always the way to go. That's where we're trying to talk about this stuff every day. So if you're a trainer or a coach or whatever, and you're interested, come on by.
Yeah, strengthcoach.com is, I've had the membership for probably 6 or 7 years now. And so yeah, it's a great spot, great articles, great information, and honestly a forum that actually works, which you don't see.
It does. It does work, and it's very, I think the people are nice and respectful, and that's a really big difference
in this industry for sure. Yeah. So, all right, Coach, we'll let you get on with your day here, but many thanks, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
All right, thank you. I'm going to click off of this thing. Thanks.
All right, that's going to wrap up episode 7 of the Fit Life Formula podcast. Thank you so much to Mike Boyle for taking the time to join us. There's some really unbelievably valuable information there, and hopefully, for those of you who are members at Advantage, it really puts into perspective where all of this comes from, why we do the things we do. Sometimes we don't talk about it a lot, but I think hearing from the guy who, like I said, curated all of this and sort of put this system in place can be really valuable, and I hope it sheds some light on why we do the things that we do, because it is well thought out. It's not just there to make you tired. It's there to keep you healthy, make you strong, keep you mobile, keep you active for the rest of your life. So thank you for tuning in to episode 7 of the Fit Life Formula podcast. My name is Brian Sipitz. Until next time, be sure to train smart and keep moving, and we'll talk to you soon.